The rain fell hard as Grace stood outside the iron gate, holding her sleeping baby close to her chest. One small travel bag rested at her feet. It was almost midnight. Her clothes were soaked, but she did not move. Inside the compound, her husband, Tunde, threw the last of her things into the muddy ground. "Take your rubbish and leave," he shouted. His mother stepped forward with folded arms. "Lock the gate. This woman will never enter this house again." The heavy gate slammed shut with a loud bang. A few neighbors watched from their windows. Some shook their heads. Others quietly closed their curtains. No one came to help. Grace knocked softly on the gate. "Please, if not for me, let the baby sleep inside. He has done nothing wrong." Tunde's voice came from behind the gate. "Ever since you came into this family, all we have seen is shame and bad luck. Leave and never come back." Grace looked down at her little boy sleeping peacefully in her arms. Tears rolled down her face as she kissed his forehead. "Today you have nowhere to sleep," she whispered. "But I promise you, one day this same gate will open for us." 3 years later, a firm knock echoed through the front door of a beautiful house. Grace looked up from the dining table. Her son smiled as he ran toward the door. "Mummy," he said, "someone is here." Grace slowly opened the door, and her heart stopped. 3 years earlier, Grace was known as one of the kindest women in her neighborhood. Every morning before sunrise, she cooked hot meals and sold them by the roadside while caring for her baby. The money was never enough, but she always found a way to support Tunde and encourage his dream of finding a better job. After he lost his work, he became quiet, angry, and easily upset. His mother blamed Grace for every problem in the family, saying she had brought nothing but suffering into their home. Grace stayed silent because she believed patience could save her marriage. She ignored the growing arguments and the cold looks from Tunde's relatives. She kept hoping that love would heal the family. Then came the day everything changed. The next morning, Grace woke before everyone else. She cleaned the house, prepared breakfast, and got ready to open her small food stand. As she tied her apron, a loud scream came from her mother-in-law's room. "My money is gone," she cried. "Someone has stolen my money." Everyone rushed into the room. Tunde looked around with worry. "What money?" "The 300,000 naira I kept in my drawer," his mother answered. "It is gone." She turned slowly and pointed at Grace. "It is her." Grace stepped back in shock. "Me, Mama, I have never touched your money." "Then who did?" the old woman shouted. "No stranger entered this house." Within an hour, uncles, aunties, and cousins began arriving. Word spread quickly through the family. Grace stood in the middle of the sitting room, as everyone looked at her with angry faces. One aunt shook her head. "We always knew she would bring trouble." Another said, "She came into this family with nothing. Now she wants to steal." Grace felt tears fill her eyes. "I did not take the money. Please believe me." Her mother-in-law laughed. "If you are innocent, where is the money?" Grace had no answer because she knew nothing about it. She looked at Tunde. "Husband, you know me. After all these years, do you truly believe I can steal from your mother?" Tunde lowered his head for a moment, then looked away. "I don't know who you are anymore," he said quietly. Those words hurt more than anything else. Grace held her baby close and cried. "I have stood by you when you had no job. I have never stopped believing in you. Please don't do this." But Tunde's face became hard. "I don't want a thief in my house." The neighbors gathered outside the compound as loud voices filled the air. Some whispered, others watched in silence. Tunde picked up Grace's small travel bag and threw it outside the gate. "Leave now," he said. His mother walked to the gate and shouted, "If she steps inside this house again, call the police." The gate slammed shut. Grace stood outside with her baby in one arm and her bag in the other. She looked from one neighbor to another, hoping someone would offer a place to sleep. No one spoke. As darkness covered the streets, Grace walked until she found a small roadside shop with a narrow roof. She sat on the cold ground and held her child close to keep him warm. That night, Grace lost more than a home. She lost her husband, her family's trust, her good name, and every dream she had built for her future. The next morning, Grace woke before the sun. Her body was tired, but she had no choice. She carried her baby on her back and walked through the streets, asking for work wherever she could. "I can cook," she told one woman. "We are not hiring," the woman replied. She knocked on another door. "I can clean houses. We already have someone." Hour after hour, Grace searched, but every answer was the same. By evening, she had only enough money to buy a small loaf of bread and a sachet of water. She fed her little boy first before eating what was left. A kind pastor saw her sitting outside with her child and invited her to stay in the church shelter. It was a simple room with thin mats on the floor, but Grace thanked God because her son finally had a safe place to sleep. For several nights, that small church became their home. One afternoon, an elderly woman named Mama Bose watched Grace helping in the church kitchen. "You cook with love," Mama Bose said with a smile. Grace lowered her head. "I used to sell food before my life fell apart." Mama Bose gently held her hand. "Then start again. Your hands still remember what your heart has not forgotten." Those words gave Grace new hope. Using the little money she had saved, she bought rice, beans, oil, and a few cooking pots. Before sunrise each morning, she prepared hot breakfast and sold it beside a busy roadside. The first day, only 3 people bought food. The second day was not much better. Some people laughed as they walked past. "Look at her," one man said. "She calls this a business." Another woman whispered, "Her husband must have chased her away." Grace heard every word, but she kept serving food with a smile. Not everyone was cruel. An old taxi driver stopped every morning. "Your food reminds me of my late wife," he said kindly. A nurse from a nearby clinic also became a regular customer. "You never give up," she told Grace. "That is why I keep coming back." Every evening, Grace counted her earnings carefully. After buying food for herself and her son, she saved every naira she could. She dreamed of giving her little boy a better life. Whenever she felt like giving up, she looked at his smiling face. "I will not fail you," she whispered. Weeks turned into months. More customers began to trust her food because it was always fresh and clean. One morning, the nurse arrived with exciting news. "Grace," she said, "my hospital needs someone to prepare food for a health program next week. I told them about you." Grace's heart began to race. "How many people?" she asked softly. The nurse smiled. 500. It was the biggest order Grace had ever received. Grace stood quietly outside the hospital kitchen, holding the signed catering agreement in her hands. She thanked the nurse again and promised she would not disappoint them. For 3 days and 3 nights, Grace barely slept. Mama Bose and a few women from the church came to help. Together they washed, cooked, packed, and checked every meal with care. When the health program ended, the hospital manager smiled warmly. "The food was fresh, clean, and delicious," he said. "We will call you again." That one job changed everything. Soon, schools, churches, birthday parties, and officers began asking Grace to prepare food for their events. Her name spread from one customer to another. Grace knew she could not do everything alone. She hired 2 young women who were looking for work. She treated them with respect and paid them on time. "I know what it feels like to be forgotten," she often told them. "As long as we work hard together, we will all grow." Month after month, the business became stronger. After saving enough money, Grace rented a small shop and turned it into a simple restaurant. It was not fancy, but it was always clean. The food was hot, and every customer was welcomed with a smile. People trusted Grace because she never cheated anyone. If a customer forgot a wallet or paid too much, she always returned the money. Her son also began school. Every afternoon he rushed home with stories about his teachers and friends. "Mummy," he said one day with a wide smile, "my teacher said I read better than anyone in my class." Grace hugged him tightly. "I am so proud of you." While Grace's life slowly became brighter, things were falling apart in Tunde's home. He searched for work every day, but found nothing. Bills piled up. His mother's health became worse, and the cost of medicine kept rising. To survive, the family sold their television, their generator, and even the pieces of land they had planned to leave for future generations. Still, the money was never enough. Grace heard small pieces of their story through people in the neighborhood, but she never celebrated their pain. She stayed focused on raising her son and growing her business. After years of careful saving, Grace bought a modest house in a peaceful part of town. It was the first place she could truly call her own. On the evening they moved in, she stood at the front door with her son. They looked around the quiet house and smiled. For the first time in many years, Grace felt safe. The fear was gone, and the peaceful life she had once prayed for had finally become real. One quiet Saturday morning, Grace was helping her son with his homework when someone knocked on the front door. She looked at the clock. She was not expecting any visitors. "Mummy, I'll get it," her son said happily. Grace smiled and stood up. "No, let me." She opened the door. Her smile slowly disappeared. Standing before her were Tunde and his mother. They looked nothing like the people she remembered. Tunde's clothes were old and wrinkled. His shoulders were bent, and his eyes were filled with shame. His mother leaned on a walking stick. She looked weak and tired. For a few moments, nobody spoke. Finally, Tunde lowered his head. "Grace, please, can we come in?" Grace stepped aside without saying a word. They entered the sitting room quietly. Her son greeted them politely before going back to his room. Tunde looked around the house in surprise. "It is beautiful," he whispered. Grace sat across from them. "What brings you here?" Tunde took a deep breath. "Our family house is about to be taken because of unpaid debts. We borrowed money after I failed to find work. The interest kept growing. Now we have nothing left." His voice shook. "We have tried everyone. Nobody can help us." His mother wiped tears from her eyes. "We came to ask if you can help us." Before Grace could answer, one of her restaurant managers rushed into the house. "Good morning, Madam Grace," he said with a smile. "The suppliers have arrived, and the workers are waiting for your approval before they unload today's goods." Another staff member followed behind him. "Congratulations, madam. The new restaurant branch is almost ready to open next week." Grace nodded calmly. "I'll be there soon." The workers greeted her with respect before leaving. Silence filled the room. Tunde stared at the closed door, unable to believe what he had just heard. "You own restaurants?" he asked softly. Grace simply nodded. "I started with one cooking pot by the roadside." Tunde covered his face with both hands. "I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me." His mother began to cry. "Grace," she said between tears, "I treated you like an enemy. I filled my son's heart with lies. I blamed you for every problem. Please forgive me." Grace listened without anger. She remembered the cold rain, the locked gate, and the long nights when her baby slept on the hard floor of the church shelter. She looked at the two people who had once turned their backs on her. They were no longer proud. They were broken. Grace folded her hands and took a slow breath. The choice before her was not about money. It was about whether she could help the people who had once abandoned her. Grace looked at Tunde and his mother for a long moment. The room was silent. She remembered every painful night, every tear, and every step she had taken to build a new life. At last, she spoke. "I forgave both of you a long time ago," she said calmly. "Not because you deserved it, but because I wanted peace for myself and for my son." Tunde slowly lifted his head. "Does that mean you will come back home?" Grace gently shook her head. "My home is here now." Those few words were enough. Tunde lowered his eyes. He finally understood that some doors, once closed, could not be opened again. Grace turned to her mother-in-law. "You are still the grandmother of my child. I will never stop him from knowing you." The old woman covered her face and cried. "I don't deserve your kindness." Grace handed her a glass of water. "This kindness is for my son, not because I forgot what happened." She then looked at Tunde. "I will pay for Mama's medical treatment. I will also help you settle part of the debt so no one is left sleeping on the street." Hope returned to Tunde's face. "But," Grace continued, "this is not a reward for what you did. It is a chance for you to start again. The rest of your life is your responsibility." Tunde nodded with tears in his eyes. "I understand. I have no excuse. I lost my family because I listened to lies instead of trusting my wife. I will carry that regret for the rest of my life." Weeks later, Grace arranged the hospital bills and helped them make a fair payment plan with those they owed. The family house could not be saved, but they found a small place to rent and slowly began rebuilding their lives. Tunde found honest work as a delivery driver. It was not the life he once imagined, but he worked hard and never complained. From time to time, Grace's son visited his grandmother. Each visit filled the old woman with both joy and regret. She treated the boy with the love she should have shown his mother years before. One evening, Grace and her son stood outside their home as the sun began to set. "Mummy," the little boy asked, holding her hand, are we safe now? Grace smiled and looked at the house they had built through hard work and courage. Yes, she said softly. No one can take our peace away again. Her son smiled. Together they walked inside, closed the door, and left the past behind, knowing that true victory is not found in revenge, but in building a life that no one can destroy. Enjoyed this story? Subscribe to Delight Tales TV, like this video, and turn on the bell for more emotional African stories every